She's not home until Friday, my brother said into his phone, leaning back against my kitchen counter like he owned it. Yeah, we're already set up. It's fine. He was wrong on both counts. I stood in the doorway of my own apartment, with my carry-on bag still in my hand, my conference lanyard still around my neck, staring at the back of his head. The flight from Chicago had landed 2 days early, because the second half of the conference was cancelled. Venue flooding, 3 inches of water in the ballroom, total disaster. I had texted no one. I just wanted to get home. What I found when I got there was not home. My white oak console table by the entry was gone, replaced by a beat-up shoe rack overflowing with size 11 sneakers and strappy sandals that were not mine. The smell hit me next. Cologne I didn't recognize, something fried from the kitchen, and underneath it all, cigarette smoke pressed into the upholstery like a permanent resident. My brother ended his call. He turned around. He did not look sorry. He looked startled for exactly 1 second, and then his face settled into something I had seen 1,000 times growing up, that slow, calculating shift into justification mode. Whoa. You're early, he said. I set my bag down on the floor very slowly. Where's my stuff, Derek? He scratched the back of his neck. Your desk and the bookshelf are in the second bedroom. We needed the master. Kayla has a bad back. She can't sleep on anything smaller than a queen. I looked past him into the living room. His girlfriend Kayla was on my sofa, both feet tucked under her, scrolling on her phone. She did not look up. On the coffee table, my grandmother's ceramic coasters were being used to hold a sweating can of soda and an open bag of chips. Her soda, her chips. Derek. I kept my voice very level. Who let you in? Dad had your spare key. He shrugged one shoulder like this was a minor logistical detail. He helped us move the big stuff Saturday. Kayla and I have been here since Sunday. 4 days. They had been in my apartment for 4 days. I had bought this place 2 years ago. Not inherited it. Not had it handed to me. I had worked 12-hour shifts as a nurse practitioner for 6 years, eaten lunch at my desk, skipped vacations, and declined every happy hour invitation until the down payment was sitting in my savings account like a promise I had made to myself. 1,200 square feet in a building with a gym and a rooftop deck, and actual soundproofed walls. It was the first place I had ever lived that felt like mine. And my brother had moved his girlfriend into my bedroom. You need to leave, I said. Kayla looked up from her phone for the first time. She had the expression of someone who had been briefed extensively and was not impressed by the opening argument. We have nowhere to go, she said, in a flat tone that suggested she had rehearsed the line. Our landlord sold the building. We had 30 days and we couldn't find anything in the budget. Derek's your family. Derek is my brother, I said. That is not the same as a lease agreement. Derek stepped forward. He lowered his voice in the way men do when they want to sound reasonable, while saying something completely unreasonable. Look, it's a 2-bedroom. You're gone half the time anyway with work and conferences. Kayla and I just need 3 months. Maybe 4. We'll find something by spring. You won't even notice us. I looked around my apartment. The rearranged furniture, the foreign shoes, the smell, the coasters. I'll give you tonight, I said. Tomorrow you find somewhere else. Derek's face shifted again, this time dropping the reasonable tone entirely. Come on, don't be like this. You have the space. You have the money. You're not exactly struggling. He gestured vaguely at the apartment, at me, at everything I had built. What is the point of having all this if you can't help your own family when they actually need it? There it was, the same argument, dressed in different clothes, that I had been hearing my entire life. My success was not mine. It was communal property to be accessed whenever someone else needed it. My savings, my apartment, my 12-hour shifts, they were infrastructure for other people's emergencies. I did not argue. I had learned a long time ago that arguing with Derek was like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Pointless and exhausting. Tonight, I said again. And then I walked into the second bedroom, my home office, where my desk had been shoved into the corner and 3 garbage bags of their clothes were piled against the wall, and I closed the door. I sat on the edge of what used to be my reading chair. I breathed. I looked at the ceiling. I had 2 options. I could call the police and explain that my father had given my brother a key I had designated for emergencies only, and that my brother had used it to move himself into my apartment without my consent. The problem was that in this city, in this state, once someone has been residing somewhere for more than 48 hours, with the implied permission of a household member, even a third-party household member like a parent holding a spare key, the legal picture gets complicated very fast. Some attorneys would argue a tenancy had already formed. I was not willing to hand Derek a 4 to 6 month eviction process as a gift. I needed a different door. I pulled out my laptop. I opened the property management portal I used for my renter's insurance and pulled up the relevant statutes for my state. I read for 45 minutes, and then I smiled. I was not a landlord. I lived in this apartment. That meant Derek and Kayla were not tenants, they were lodgers. In most states, a lodger is someone who rents a room from a homeowner or primary occupant who also lives on the premises. Lodgers have almost none of the protections tenants do. They can be removed with written notice. They do not have a right to a court proceeding. If the primary resident wants them out, they are out. But to make that work cleanly, I needed a document. Something with their signature on it that established their status explicitly, not as tenants, not as guests, but as lodgers operating under a revocable license to occupy. I needed to get them to sign something without them understanding exactly what they were signing. I went back out to the living room. Okay, I said. I've thought about it. Derek looked up. Kayla set down her phone. I can't just have 2 people living here without any kind of paperwork. My building has rules. The HOA requires me to register any occupants who stay longer than 30 days. If I don't, I risk my lease with the building. I let that settle. But if we do this right, I can put you both down as registered occupants. That gives you building access, a mailbox key, even the gym. And since you'd be officially listed, my renter's insurance would cover you too, if anything happened. I watched Derek's expression travel from suspicion to calculation to interest in about 4 seconds. He was always susceptible to anything that sounded like a benefit he was getting for free. What does that involve? He asked. Just a simple house sharing agreement. Standard stuff. Says you're residing here temporarily, what your responsibilities are, house rules. 30 seconds to read, 30 seconds to sign. Kayla reads everything, Derek said. Good, I said. That's smart. I went back to my office and spent 50 minutes writing the most carefully worded document of my life. I had looked up the exact statutory language. I embedded the critical clauses not at the top where eyes naturally land, but in the middle of the document, wrapped in mundane language about garbage schedules and noise curfews. Clause 6. Occupants acknowledge their status as lodgers under the primary occupant's license, and not as tenants, subtenants, or lessees. No tenancy is created by this agreement. Clause 9. The right to occupy the premises is a revocable license, terminable by the primary occupant at any time, upon written notice of no less than 3 days, delivered by email or in person. Clause 11. Occupants consent to the presence of existing security cameras in all common areas for safety monitoring purposes. Clause 14. The primary occupant retains exclusive access to all utilities, building systems, and smart home functions at all times. I buried Clause 9 between a paragraph about recycling guidelines and a paragraph about guest parking. I printed it on 4 pages to make it look longer and more bureaucratic than it was. Long documents make people skim. I walked back out and set the pages on the coffee table. Building management wants this notarized eventually, but a signed copy buys us 30 days, I said. After that, I'll get it officially filed. I watched Kayla read. She moved through pages 1 and 2 carefully, slowing at the recycling section, speeding up again through the parking rules. She flipped to page 3. She did not slow down in the middle. She flipped to page 4 and handed it to Derek, who read nothing and picked up the pen. What's the Wi-Fi password? He asked, signing his name. I'll text it to you, I said. Kayla, your signature goes right below his. She signed. I countersigned with a date and timestamp, folded my copy, and walked back to my office. The trap had closed. But I had not yet pulled the string. I was not sleeping in my office. That was not something I was willing to do. I went back out, picked up my bag, and told them I was going to stay with a friend for a couple of nights so everyone had space to adjust. I watched Derek's shoulders drop 2 inches with relief. That was all I needed to see. I drove to the Marriott 4 miles away, checked into a king room, ordered room service, and opened my laptop. The Ring camera system I had installed 6 months ago covered the living room, the kitchen, and the hallway outside the master bedroom. The footage was stored in the cloud. I could watch every second of every hour of the past 4 days, and I could watch in real time. I started with day 1. My dad arrived at 7:45 on Saturday morning with his pickup truck, a truck that, I happened to know, belonged to his employer. He was a facilities manager at a mid-sized logistics company. He was not supposed to use the company vehicle for personal business. I knew this because he had lectured Derek about exactly this rule 3 years ago, when Derek borrowed it without asking. I watched my dad carry boxes. I watched him assemble a bed frame in my master bedroom, using tools he had brought in a company-branded duffel bag. I saved the timestamps. I kept watching. On day 2, I watched Derek smoke inside the apartment. Not just once. He opened the window slightly, and smoked leaning against my kitchen counter, ashing into the sink. He did it 3 times in a single afternoon. My lease with the building explicitly prohibited smoking inside units. His signature on a document that described him as a lodger with specific behavioral obligations made that my legal ammunition to remove him. On day 3, I watched Kayla go through the drawers of my office desk. Not quickly, methodically. She pulled out a folder of old pay stubs, looked at them, put them back. She found my external hard drive. She held it up to the light and turned it over in her hands before setting it down. She was not looking for anything specific. She was cataloging. On day 4 today, 40 minutes after I had checked into the Marriott, I watched Derek make a phone call. He sat on my couch, both feet on my coffee table, and he spoke with the loose-limbed ease of someone who had already forgotten there were cameras in the room. I turned up the volume. She bought it completely, he said, laughing. I told you. She always wants to be the bigger person. She gave us the speech about needing paperwork, made us sign something, and now she's gone to a friend's place. She literally left her own apartment. He paused, listening. No, man. She doesn't know about the child support thing. That's the whole point. If I'm off the radar, they can't garnish my check. This place is perfect. She doesn't have a boyfriend. She travels for work. She won't even be here half the time. It's basically free rent. He laughed again. I sat in the Marriott King room, eating a club sandwich, watching my brother explain to someone on the phone exactly why he had really moved into my apartment. He was not there because he had lost housing. He was there because the Child Support Enforcement Division of the county had been attempting to garnish his wages for 11 months. He had 2 years of back payments owed to his ex-girlfriend for their 4-year-old son. He had bounced between addresses to stay off the official record. My apartment, registered in my name, with no paper trail connecting him to it, was the perfect disappearing act. He had not moved into my home out of desperation. He had moved in because my home was useful to him. I set down my sandwich. I pulled up the Child Support Enforcement contact page for the county and noted the tip line number. I pulled up the HR contact form for my dad's employer and noted the email address for reporting improper use of company vehicles. I opened my email and drafted 2 termination documents. The 3-day written notice I was entitled to issue under the lodger statute, addressed to both Derek and Kayla, delivered to Derek's phone number via text screenshot and to the apartment address via email, time-stamped, and legally formatted. I did not send anything yet. I called the one person I trusted with paperwork more than anyone. My college roommate had gone to law school. She was a family attorney now, and she owed me approximately 17 favors. I told her what I had. I told her about the lodger agreement, the security footage, the child support situation, and my dad's use of the company truck. She was quiet for a moment. The lodger agreement is airtight, she said. 3-day notice is all you need. They don't get to dispute it in court because there's no tenancy. You issue the notice. They don't leave. You call the police and report trespassers. What about the child support tip? That's public information. You're not doing anything wrong by reporting a location. You're a private citizen with knowledge of a person's whereabouts who has legal obligations they're avoiding. She paused. Your dad's truck situation is between him and his employer. That's your call. I thanked her. I hung up. I lay back on the hotel bed and looked at the ceiling for a while. I thought about the version of me that would have handled this differently. The version that would have knocked on the office door, cried a little, given Derek a speech about boundaries. Let him stay another week while he figured things out. Then another week, then quietly started sleeping on my own office floor, while he and Kayla took over my life one drawer at a time. I had been that version of myself before. With Derek, with my parents, with people who were very good at identifying exactly how much I could be pushed before I said something. That version had been wrong about what kindness was. Real kindness is not absorbing someone else's dysfunction until you have none of yourself left. Real kindness to Derek, to everyone in this situation, was not letting it continue. I sat up. I picked up my phone. I sent Derek and Kayla the 3-day notice via text message. I emailed it to the apartment address. I sent a copy to my friend for her records. The message was 3 paragraphs of clean, dry legal language, informing them that their license to occupy the premises was being revoked under the terms of the agreement they had signed, effective immediately upon receipt of this notice, and that they were required to vacate no later than 72 hours from the timestamp on this message. I watched the camera feed. Derek read the text. I could see him do it from the kitchen camera. His face going through the same progression his face always went through. Confusion, anger, calculation. He called me. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He texted. This is insane. You can't kick us out. We're practically tenants at this point. We signed a contract. I texted back. You signed a lodger agreement. Please refer to clause 6. There was a long pause. Then, I'm not leaving. I had expected that. I had planned for that. I opened the smart home app on my phone. My apartment had a smart thermostat, smart locks, and the Wi-Fi was on my account. I had reset the Wi-Fi password the night I checked into the hotel. They had been on data since this morning without realizing the password had already been changed. I dropped the thermostat to 61 degrees. I watched on camera as Kayla looked up from her phone and pulled her knees to her chest. Derek went to the thermostat, pressed the buttons, got nowhere. He pulled up his own phone and tried to access the app with the login credentials I had given him, the temporary guest account I had set up, which I had now revoked. The screen on the thermostat read, access restricted, contact primary user. He called me again. What did you do to the heat? He said when I picked up. It's my apartment, Derek. My thermostat. It's 60 degrees in here. 61, I said. It's above the legal minimum. You have 72 hours. I'd suggest using them productively. You can't do this. This is harassment. I can cite you the statute if you'd like. I looked it up this morning. I kept my voice very calm. The voice I used at work when a patient's family member was escalating and I needed to be the steady thing in the room. You're a lodger. You signed a document saying so. You have 3 days. After that, I will call the police and report trespassers. Do you understand? He hung up. I waited 2 hours. Then I called the child support enforcement tip line. I gave them Derek's full legal name, his date of birth, and his current address, which was my address, which was on file with the county as belonging to me. I told them he had been residing there and that I could confirm his presence on the premises as recently as this evening. The woman on the phone thanked me and said someone would follow up. I went to sleep. The next morning I watched the camera feed with my coffee. Derek and Kayla were both awake. Early 61 degrees tends to do that. Kayla was in her coat inside the apartment, sitting at the kitchen table, looking at her phone with an expression that had lost all of its earlier composure. She was looking at listings. Actual listings. The coat was doing something my speech the night of my arrival had not done. It was making the situation feel real. Derek was on the phone in the hallway, talking to my dad. I turned up the volume. She sent a legal notice. Dad, some kind of lodger thing. She says we're not tenants. A pause. I don't know. She had us sign something when she got back. Said it was for the building. I didn't think. Another pause. Can you talk to her? Pause. Then talk to a lawyer. I need someone to tell me she can't actually do this. My dad called me an hour later. Sweetheart, he said. He only called me that when he needed something. I think there's been a misunderstanding. There hasn't been, I said. You gave Derek my spare key. You used your company truck to help him move into my apartment without my knowledge or consent. I have footage. Silence. The company truck, I said again, that you are not permitted to use for personal business. I have time-stamped security footage of you loading boxes from a company vehicle into my building's service entrance. The silence stretched out long enough to become its own answer. I'm not trying to get you fired, I said. And I meant it. But I need Derek and Kayla out of my apartment by the deadline. If they're gone by then, this conversation never happened. If they're not, I will have to talk to someone about the truck. My dad said he would call Derek. I watched the footage that afternoon. Derek and Kayla argued for 40 minutes. I could not hear everything. They moved into the master bedroom at some point, away from the kitchen camera, but I could see them through the hallway camera going back and forth, and I could see Kayla's face when she came back out. She had stopped looking composed about 20 minutes into the argument. She was pulling up listings again on her phone, but this time, she was taking screenshots. The following morning, day 2 of the 3-day notice, a county-issued vehicle pulled up outside my building. I know because Derek texted me in all capital letters at 9:17 in the morning. The message was one sentence, and I will not reproduce it here, but the tone made very clear that someone had knocked on my apartment door and that the person knocking had not been a neighbor. Derek called me 11 times between 9 and 11 that morning. I did not answer. At noon, a mover's van arrived. I watched it on the building's exterior camera, which I had access to through the building management portal. I watched them load the van. I watched Kayla carry out the bags she had moved in 4 days ago. I watched Derek carry out the stupid shoe rack from the entryway. I watched my grandmother's ceramic coasters reappear on the coffee table, moved back to their original spot by Kayla on her last trip through, in what I chose to read as the smallest possible acknowledgement that something had gone wrong. By 2 in the afternoon, they were gone. I drove back to my apartment. I parked in my spot. I took the elevator to my floor and stood in front of my own door and put the key in the lock. Everything smelled like them still. The couch cushions, the kitchen, the air near the window where Derek had smoked. I opened every window. I found 3 cigarette burns on the windowsill I had not seen on camera. I found a ring on my hardwood floor from something wet and heavy. I found the cereal boxes in the pantry moved, and behind them, nothing whatever Kayla had been looking for or hiding, she had taken with her. I called a cleaning service. They came the next morning and spent 4 hours restoring what 4 days of someone else's life had taken from me. My dad did not speak to me for 3 weeks. When he finally called, he said he thought I had overreacted, and that family should take care of family. I told him I agreed completely, which was why I had not reported the truck. We left it there. Derek left the city. I found out through a mutual cousin that he had gone to stay with a friend of Kayla's in another state. The child support case followed him. It follows you regardless of where you go. His wages were garnished within the month. I had my bedroom back. I had my coasters back. I had the silence I had paid for, the soundproofed walls, the rooftop deck in the mornings with coffee when I had a day off. My spare key now lives in a safety deposit box at my bank. There is a single line in my own private document that governs who gets access to my home. No one, unless I am standing right next to them when they use it. I had spent years believing that having enough meant you owed something to everyone around you who didn't, that your stability was a debt you had to pay down forever, with interest, to people who never asked themselves why they kept running out. It took standing in the doorway of my own apartment, looking at the back of my brother's head on my couch in my living room, using my Wi-Fi, to understand that was never true. What I had built was mine, not because I was selfish, but because I had built it. The people who wanted to take it, they never saw the 12-hour shifts. They never saw the sad desk lunches or the evenings I said no to so I could say yes to myself someday. They saw the apartment and concluded I had simply gotten lucky, and that luck was something you could walk into without knocking. They were wrong about all of it. The best boundary I ever set was not a conversation. It was a document. It was a signature on a page that said, in the precise and unambiguous language of the law, "This belongs to me, and your being here is a privilege, not a right." And the moment that privilege was abused, I withdrew it. Not out of anger, not to punish anyone, simply because I had finally stopped confusing cruelty with clarity. Saying no to people who take from you is not the same as refusing to help people who need you. One is a choice, the other is surrender. And I was done surrendering. I live alone now, by choice, in an apartment that smells like coffee in the mornings, and nothing in particular in the evenings. My grandmother's coasters are on the coffee table. The windowsill has a new coat of paint. The spare key is at the bank. I am not the safety net for someone else's chaos. I am the architect of my own peace. And for the first time in a very long time, the person living inside these walls is exactly who is supposed to be here.